Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So in a previous video, I made fruit crates, boxes, bins, and baskets for the harvest for the dolls. And I need to go ahead and make those actual fruits and vegetables that are going in the bags, boxes, and bins. Now to make my fruits and vegetables for my doll houses, I always use polymer clay. For years, I used air dry clay and other things, but when I found out about all the different colors and the fact that polymer clay doesn't harden until you bake it, that truly changed the game for me. Now, to me, one of the most tedious parts of preparing your clay is mixing your colors and getting the right shades. Foods come in such a variety of colors and tones, so take the time to create a variety of different shades and tones, even in one color. Now, although today I'm making fruits and vegetables, soon I'm going to be doing breads and meats and leafy vegetables. So I'm going to need a variety of shades. You don't need expensive tools to do this. Now, the tool with the 3 points I created from clay and a toothpick, and the others are pearl hat pins with clay baked on as the handle, which was the 1970s version of a ball stylus. Now, there are a lot of polymer clay companies, but my two brands are Fimo or SCULPEY. Now, both brands offer soft and firm formulas, but you will need to play around with it a little bit to determine which one works best for you. I like the firm formula for my dolls and the soft one for my food. So I usually start with my browns and neutrals, and then I worked a little bit with the orange, and I kind of move progressively to the deeper, more vibrant colors because sometimes the color will come off on your fingers and you don't want it to distort your shades. Now, keep baby wipes or something nearby to clean your hands because the colors will transfer to one another. Now, again, you want to prep everything before you get started because there's nothing more frustrating than to get an idea or inspiration and then you have to stop and mix and make colors. But if you're not into color theory, almost any shade imaginable can be purchased. Now for me, I really do get a kick out of mixing my own colors because I can get more graduated tones. Now you can see here that some of the color is transferring to my fingers, so that's why you want to do the lighter colors first, or just make sure you clean your hands in between. Now one of the biggest pluses for me for using polymer clay is that it doesn't harden until you bake it. That used to be one of my main frustrations with air dry clay. So it gives me the freedom and flexibility to work on a project, leave it, and whenever I return to work, it's in the same state. And here's a quick comparison of the orange mixed with brown and the one mixed with yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the harvest production with potatoes. To me, potatoes are so much fun because there's so many different kinds and they're very simple to make. Now I always start off with some little pinches of kind of a taupe color, and I use this little tool that I created to make the little dimples or dents in the potatoes. Now all you need is a small pinch of clay, and you want to pinch 3 points on the piece of clay. And once you pinch the 3 points, you want to insert a toothpick in the bottom as a handle. Now here's the very same tool. I made it the same way, and I added a little spoon spatula part at the end, which is really great for making that little split part on nectarines and plums. Now after you bake your little tool to the toothpick, you can use it to make your little dimple holes in your potato. And it's actually not a bad idea to make each little point slightly different. So one point for fine dimples and the other ones for more blunt dimples. Now when you're making the potatoes, there is no rhyme or reason of how many holes or dimples you put in your potatoes. It's totally up to you. You can make your potato skins darker or lighter, and your shapes and sizes would depend on the type of potato. So you definitely have to decide that when you're doing your tones and colors, whether it's a red skin potato or a Yukon Gold or russet, it's all up to you. So let's move on to tomatoes. This is really exciting for me because I really love tomatoes. Now to get the right tomato shade, you do have to work with the color. Now I originally added a little orange to the red, but I feel like I need a little bit more yellow to get the more tomatoey shade. Now you can make any type of tomatoes you like. I am partial to the really big beefsteak tomatoes, and also I really like the heirloom tomatoes as well. I'm also very fond of them when they're green and really firm and perfect for slicing to fry. Anybody out there like fried green tomatoes? Let me know in the comments. Now, I want to let you know ahead of time, my fruit and vegetables are detailed, but I wouldn't call them high definition. I'm more or less just trying to create an impression so that on sight from a distance, you'll recognize what the fruit or vegetable is. Now, here I'm using a dental tool to create those little gathers I call right around the part of the stem of the tomato. Now, if you don't have a dental tool, you can definitely use a toothpick. Now, these dental tools are very special to me because they were given to me by my daddy. He was a clay modeler for Ford Motor Company in the 70s. And after he stopped working there, he said he had kept these tools for years and never knew why he kept hanging on to them. I guess somewhere deep in his heart, he always knew that one day I would need them. Now in this frame, when I started to work on my pears, I realized I couldn't find my green floral wire. I have a whole ream of it and have no idea where it is. When I started this video, I looked for it and I couldn't find it, but it's best practice to glue it right into the fruit. Now pears, just like with any other fruit, there are many varieties, so have fun with it. Now you can see here in this frame that the color or tones of the clay really play heavily into you being able to recognize the item. Now notice in the previous frame I was using a tone of green as well, but this particular shade has less yellow and more green because I'm shaping some tiny apples. Now the process is very similar, except I just start with a round circle, put a dimple in the top and the bottom, and I'm using red clay to do the exact same thing because I'm making red apples now. And again, I just start with a ball in the palm of my hand and then add the little dimple in the top and in the bottom. And this is definitely a project where you want to make multiples and save the spares. Now here's another one of my produce favorites, which is the sweet potato. And just to be clear, sweet potatoes and yams are not the same thing. Now here I'm using the clay that I mixed the orange and brown together and just pinching them on the ends and leaving it a little bit full in the middle. Now dolls, if you need a reference picture while you're making your produce, definitely use it. And I guess I more so have the tendency to make the fruits and vegetables for my dolls that I eat all the time. So I generally don't need a picture for reference because they're always on the breakfast room table. Now, I'm making enough produce to fill some boxes and bins, but as I mentioned earlier, it's always a good practice to make more than you need so that you'll have spares on hand for additional scenes or settings. And I also made a few plums and some peaches. Now, I want to share with you the book that got me started into making fruits and vegetables back in the 70s. One Saturday, Daddy took me to Little Professor bookstore in Dearborn and bought me this book by Barbara Meyer. And this book was published in 1977, which was the year that I got my original dollhouse. Now, this is the book that I learned how to make that little tool out of, and she used very simple things to create all of her fruits and vegetables. Now, all of her fruits and vegetables are made by a product she made called bread dough, which was basically white bread and dishwashing liquid, which is what I made my original fruits and vegetables out of prior to me learning about polymer clay. Now, although this book isn't in print anymore, I have seen a few copies on eBay. Now, this is also the publication that gave me the inspiration to make the little tool that I shared with you earlier in the video. Now, this is a really great book, and it shows how she made various different types of produce and things for her general store. As a child, I always loved staring at these beautiful photographs, always hoping that one day I'd be able to make fruits and vegetables as nice as hers. Now, although I've had this book for many, many years, I haven't tried all of the fruits and vegetables. I mainly focused on the ones that I needed for my particular scenes, but I always loved looking at all these beautiful pictures and considering the possibilities. So let me go ahead and stop reminiscing and show you what I created. Now I baked my items in an old pie pan that I no longer use. Now always follow the baking instructions for your polymer clay package because you don't want to overcook and scorch your little creations. Now in addition to the ones I made on camera, I did make a few extras. Now, in addition to your base color of your produce being the right color, I believe the shading and detailing are really important. Now, produce like potatoes grow underground, so I expect them to be a little dirty. If they're too clean, I'll be a little bit suspicious. Now, before I add my dirt, I forgot to add little cuts in my sweet potatoes, so I'm doing little lines on them to give them a little bit more realism and texture. I actually should have added that when I was creating them in their soft form, but it's fine. The little cuts I put in them will allow the paint and alcohol wash to seep into them to make them look a little bit more realistic. At this stage, everything looks pretty neat and clean, but as I add the black, the brown, and the alcohol wash, it'll stain them to make them look a little bit mucky and dirty, which really brings them to life. Now, in this frame, I'm not doing each and every piece. I'm just kind of trying to make them look a little grimy and dirty collectively. So my process is a little bit primal, but to me, it gives a more realistic look so that everything isn't perfect. It's random and make things look a little splotchy. Now, although they look a little bit better, I really want them to look dirtier. So I'm going in and tapping each and every one now with the darker paint and the alcohol, which will stain them even more. Now, while I'm allowing my potato stains to dry, I scraped off a little orange and red chalk pastel to shade some of my fruit. Now I started off adding the little mixture to some of my yellow apples, and after just adding the chalk pastel while it was dry, and I really liked it, but I decided to go ahead and try a little bit of alcohol wash on it before I added the chalk pastel to see the difference in the effect that it gave. So I want you to realize I'm not displeased with the look of the chalk pastel. I'm just experimenting because I really like the staining of the alcohol wash. So I added the alcohol first and then came back and added the chalk pastel on top of it. And it kind of made the color a little bit more vibrant, and I think it kind of made it stick a little bit better. And although the difference is very subtle, I do think I'm going to add it to my list of best practices. This part is always so much fun, and now that everything is coming to life, I can't wait to start setting things up. Now, in a previous creation, I did make some fruits and vegetables back at Christmas time, and I actually added leaves with clay to my tomatoes. But this time I'm going to use a nail striper and just paint some leaves directly on using my nail striper. So I'm pulling all the tomatoes out so they'll all be available. And I first started out doing them one by one individually between my fingers. And then I realized it would be more convenient to do them all at once. So I added some double-sided tape to some building blocks one of my grandsons left out after a play visit. And the block is really the perfect size to get quite a few vegetables on it. But I put all my tomatoes on, and it was a lot easier to stripe on the little leaves in this fashion than trying to hold them individually. Now, I didn't want it to look too perfect, but I was able to take my time and do each one individually to make it look as realistic as possible. Now, adding this green paint to the red apples is definitely an experiment. I'm not sure if I like it or not. I may wipe them off, but I had to try it. Now, to add a little shine, I always add a little craft glaze to my fruits and vegetables, mainly the apples and the tomatoes. Now, for the potatoes, I usually leave them kind of plain because I think they should look a little dull. Now, the craft glaze is very similar to Mod Podge in that it looks white when it goes on, but it's going to dry absolutely clear. So don't be concerned if it looks a little cloudy while it's wet. Now, I will leave a link in the description for when I made my original fruit crate, but I really got inspired after looking at the pictures of the book that Daddy got me years ago. The boxes and her pictures were different than the kind that I made in a previous video, and I wanted to give them a try. Now, I didn't have a pattern or anything, but I had some scrap pieces of 1/16 inch basswood, and I glued 4 little square dowels to the corner, and then I added my weld bond glue to glue on some coffee stir sticks to stack them and make it look like a crate. And after going around the little box little by little, gluing the coffee stir sticks around and securing them to the little wooden dowels, I ended up with something that looked like this. And although it turned out a little bit crude, it's nothing a little sanding and stain can't fix. Now here are the 2 little baskets that I made in a previous video, and I will leave a link in the description. But I thought they really looked cute with the peaches in them, but they seemed kind of low, like the basket wasn't really full. So rather than make more peaches, I just added a little tissue paper to the bottom of the basket. Now make sure you tuck it in really nice so that it's not visible. Too bad I didn't have any miniature hay, because I think that would look really cute too. I think this little basket turned out really cute. Now, I didn't show it in the video, but I did make some cucumbers, and I decided to put them in this basket. And I need to do the same treatment to make them a little bit higher because it wasn't quite enough cucumbers to make the basket look full. Now that looks like a load of cucumbers. Now at this point, I was really starting to get excited because things were really starting to come together. And it was time for me to add the potatoes, which were the whole inspiration for this entire video. And I did the same thing, adding the tissue paper to the base of the crate to make the potatoes sit up a little bit higher and make them more visible. And I think it really, really turned out nice. Now, I want to encourage you, dolls, that if this is your first time making fruits and vegetables, give yourself some grace because things like this take practice. You don't come out the gate knowing how to make them perfectly. I've been making fruits and vegetables for years, and there's still plenty of room for improvement. And you better believe that there are people who make fruits and vegetables that definitely make this look like pre-K. But you better believe it has taken them years of practice to get to that point. So go ahead and make you some fruits and vegetables. And if they're not perfect, don't worry about it. Just make sure you have fun. And no matter what they look like, I think your dolls will just be happy to have some food. And last but not least, here are my delicious tomatoes. Now, dolls, if you enjoyed this video today, definitely let me know in the comments. Also, like, share, and subscribe. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.